Quick update on the receiver. Okay, it's starting to get there now. I've done quite a bit more work on the top of the receiver here. I've welded the plate considerably thicker. See there? It's quite a nice thick piece of steel now by the time I've done that. It was about 6mm thick plate, but I've welded another piece which is 1.5mm thick up on the top to build it up slightly, and I've ground it and filed it down to make it look relatively presentable. By the time I actually do a bluing on that, it'll look good. I've also reprofiled the back of the hole here. Could probably do with a little bit more work, but it's not so bad really. Now, if I compare that with the top of the real one, without knocking it over, right. So it's not too bad. As I say, it's a little touch wider than the real one, but you see, when you compare it like that, you notice there's not a lot in it. See? Not a lot of difference in the width. Now, I've got to weld this little plate on the top, just here, and I've also got to do this curved part at the back. I had a quick look round and I found this piece of old exhaust which I had lying around from probably a job on my Jeep or tank, and it's got a few bends in it which are quite useful, but this one here, because it's near to an end and maybe I could still use the rest of the pipe sometime, this piece here, I reckon if I cut that out of there with a little bit of hammering here and there, I reckon I can get that to fit into the profile I want. So I've just got to work out how to mark a nice curved line out in here, or maybe make it a little bit deeper and then file it into shape to fit into the profile, and we'll see how it goes. So that gives me something that looks like that. So now I'm just got to do a little bit of shaping to it with a hammer and widen it out a little bit so that I can weld it. Now I can either weld it along on the seam there, or I can flip this over and weld it on the inside for more strength. But either way it'll be fine. Right, I think that's probably about as close as I'm going to get it to it. All I need to do now is weld this in down the two sides. That side's not brilliant down here, but I think if I build it up a bit with some weld and then file it in, it should work out quite well. I'd say that, you know, it should work out. Okay, so you can see I've just got to cut these slots out there, the zigzag out of this metal, after I've put a bend in it. I'll put the bend in it first, then I'll cut the slots out, and it should fit into there and I can weld it in. Okay, with a bit of sawing, filing and hammering, you can sort of get it to look like that. Now that's just about good enough for welding in now. So once welded in, it should look like that. Ready for grinding. Okay, what I've done now is I've cut the plate to go on the front end of the receiver where the barrel's going to mount, and I've been calculating the exact point where the barrel's going to have to fit through the front of this plate. Now, yeah, the other thing is, see this plate here? See how I've ground the edges to about 45 degrees? Basically, that's going to be the face which is going to be pointing out the front of the gearbox, front of the receiver. And I've done the same thing. I've ground or filed an edge round in there, and basically that's going to be where the weld is going to fill in all the way around, and then I'm going to grind it back so that hopefully it'll be strong enough to support its weight. Right, the gearbox and receiver. Okay, as I said, I was working to quite close tolerances on this, and there is practically no free movement inside this receiver for this gearbox. It doesn't move. You can just about hear a little bit of free play, hardly anything there. See how close it all fits. Now, that's basically, if I lift this out, you'll see the top flat on the top of the gearbox and so on. That flat area, that sits against this flat area in the top of the gearbox. It's right up against it. There's no movement. Solid. Well, virtually solid. Just a quarter of a millimetre maybe, which is fine. Now, basically I've measured the height that the air nozzle sits at, basically by using a depth gauge and then reading off the measurement. It comes to 13 millimeters, just there, 13 mil. So that 13 mil plus the thickness of the steel here, which is 6 millimeters, I just calculate, if I just measure that, 6 millimeters. Yeah, so that gives me 19 millimeters. So from the top face of the receiver here, yeah, as it's upside down at the moment, but the top face of this receiver to the centre of the barrel has got to be 19 millimeters. So hence I've calculated the point here where that's got to sit, where the hole's got to be drilled in the front, and that's how basically I've got to work out now how I'm going to support the barrel in the front of it. If we were to look at the real gun and take a measurement okay, if we're to measure this part here, that's actually 33 millimeters. Plus there's a small drop of 3 millimeters here on that front edge. So that gives me 36. So half of 36 is 18 millimeters. So 18 millimeters. So the barrel center there to line up on this receiver on the real gun is 18 millimeters, and I'm making mine 19 millimeters down. So I'm within 1 millimeter of the original gun is how mine works out. So I'm pretty damn happy with that.